Welcome, everyone. First, I'd kind of like to start by just acknowledging three really special veterans that we had here that we've moved out in the past couple days in Jason Dickinson, Connor Murphy, and Nick Foligno. I think they're some people that have certainly left a very strong, positive, and impactful mark on our organization, our city, and a lot of our players that'll be here for a long time to come. And so I just can't thank them enough for their professionalism, their play, their dedication, and everything that they brought to the organization. Also like to acknowledge Colton Dach and Aidan Thompson, who we moved out in the last couple days. Really hard workers, young players that are kind of starting their, still early in their professional journeys, but really excited to watch them continue their careers elsewhere, and then excited to welcome Andrew Mangiapane and Derek Pouliot to the organization as well, and excited to see their contributions over the coming years. So again, I think we accomplished some pretty strong acquisitions in terms of future assets and players that can serve a purpose here with us over the next little while. It's tough to see really amazing people move on, but I'm really excited for all of them and their new opportunities and what they're going to be able to experience over the next little while here. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
Was this trade deadline just as a whole? We've been talking to several GMs, and was it seemed a little more quiet overall? And what would you attribute that to?
I don't know. I honestly don't know what I'd attribute it to. Perhaps the ability of teams to hold on to players. Maybe players are more locked up in terms of their obligations to their team beyond this year, less UFAs coming up. I'm not sure, to be honest. It perhaps around the league seemed a little bit quieter, certainly today. For us, seemed business as usual. Just you have your conversations and your exploratory talks in some cases, but so it didn't really change much on my end, and I wouldn't say the volume of calls in and out was any more or less than any other year. And so, but around the league, it maybe seemed a little more quiet than normal. But I honestly, I don't think I have the answer on why that is.
Two players you brought in both have term. What was the thought behind that?
I think in Andrew's case, certainly there was a cap component there, but he was someone that we dug into both on and off the ice, and did feel like he could be a good fit. I think we're getting a very motivated player. I think he can bring some tenacity and some he's been around this league for a bit, so a little bit of veteran experience. We certainly sent a lot out recently, and so I think he can provide there. But I think there's a lot to prove for him coming in, and we're excited to give him that opportunity to show what he's got. I know it didn't go as he had planned this year in Edmonton, so I think a fresh start for him will be really healthy, and we're excited to give it to him. With Derek, he's gonna join up with Rockford right now, and Derek's been around pro hockey for a number of years now, and I think he can bring a good veteran presence, log some minutes. We've called up a lot of defensemen from Rockford over the last little while, and haven't provided them with a ton of help. So I hope that can give them a little bit of a boost. And then he signed for next year as well, and I think we're going to have again an influx of young talent, more so up front. And so a veteran on the back end, especially one that's adept at moving pucks up to those young forwards, I think is something that was important to us. It would probably be something we're going to look for in the summer, and so got a little bit of business out of the way. Obviously, it came at a cost in Aidan, but you have to give something to get something, and that's kind of how it broke.
Moving out your entire leadership core is fairly unprecedented. What made you believe that now is the time for the young players to step up and take over those roles?
Yeah, there's we did move out a lot of leadership, but I think we still have a lot in that room. There's a lot of good veterans still in that room. And then, we've got a lot of emerging young leaders. Alex Lask has been around this league a while, and then we've got some guys that know what they need to do to win and know what they need to do and what the team needs to do to keep progressing. And I think it's an opportunity for a lot of young players to step into the void and continue progressing their own leadership capabilities and developing their voice in the room. And so, I don't necessarily fear for the lack of leadership. I think it's there. It's just going to come in a different form now. And I'm excited for a lot of those young guys to find that voice and find that next bit of contribution that they could, they had some really, really good positive leaders to learn from over the last couple of years. Both that we've, moved out now, but even looking back to the last couple of years, they've got to learn from guys like Patty Maroon and Alec Martinez and the guys that have even come before them, and then obviously Murph, Dickey, and Nick. So they've seen what it's like. They've seen what needs to be said at the right times, and so it's time for them to start either vocalizing or through their actions taking charge of the room. And there's going to be opportunity to do that over the next bit of this season to finish off, and then we'll see how the summer goes. But it's their locker room now, and it's time for them to take over and say what needs to be said when it needs to happen. So I'm excited for them, and I think it's a good bit of opportunity for them to grow into that.
Kind of piggyback off of that, Connor Bedard has the A for the rest of this season. I'm sure there's a captaincy in his future. Just how have you seen him kind of develop that leadership capabilities? I mean, he's already the face of the franchise, and kind of developing those leadership abilities and what he was learning from those guys over these last couple of years. Yeah,
I think, with, again, whether it's Connor or any young player, it takes time to get comfortable in this league, and there's a lot of feeling out process and understanding where your place within that leadership structure is. And I believe this year, coming into this season, Connor, we obviously saw his play, but it just his voice and his ability to command that room and be a presence within the room, I think really took a step forward. And you feel it when you're around him. You see it when the group's just kind of hanging out around the rink or on the road, and he's a guy that people gravitate towards. And so I believe he'll continue to grow in that respect and find his own leadership style. Everyone's different. We've had a great example of the leadership at the top of that pyramid with Nick over the last number of years, and whoever steps into that spot or takes on a little bit more of that lead role is not going to be Nick. It's going to be, I'm sure, a different style, but equally as effective, I'd assume and expect. And so there's going to be further growth because still young player, and he's going to figure that out. But you can just see the comfort in that role growing over the last year or so. But we're fortunate to have a number of young players that have either played leadership roles in the past with their teams, but who have also matured into players that I think others can gravitate towards and look to for guidance in times of need. So I think we're in a really good spot there moving forward.
A lot of fans have see the vision with your reboot so far, and with that comes some fans that have some concerns about the future as well. What would you say to those fans that kind of don't see eye with your vision as of right now?
Well, I can't really address every quibble that someone might have with the vision, but you know what, like I think that's natural in any, I think there's probably teams around the league that the fan base is asking to get younger, and when you're younger they're asking to get a little bit older, and so that's fandom, that's what happens. But I think that whether people want to hear it or not, we're committed to a vision here, and we've picked a path. We're committed to that, and we're going to execute within that vision. And so we're continuing to do that. We're continuing to I believe in these young players. I believe in this group of young prospects that we have coming, both here and not in the NHL. as they continue to mature, as they continue to get comfortable and develop into the players that we see them becoming and we expect them to become in this league, that's going to drive our team's success. And that doesn't mean that, again, it's only going to come from these players. Like, there's opportunities along the way. I would hope and expect, in the future to add and inject some more talent. And, again, but as I said before, like, we can only deal with what we know, and we know all these players coming in, we know these players coming up, and we believe in them wholeheartedly, not just with rose-colored glasses, that they can get us to where we want to go. And so that's the vision. That's what we're committed to. We believe in that. And again, we've got a ton of young players on the way. We've got a ton of draft capital that is there for us to use moving forward. And so we're positioned very well. It's something that doesn't happen overnight. We're such a young team here. We're such a, for the most part, quite an inexperienced team in the landscape of the NHL. And so that takes time. And that's not easy to come in and just be great right away, especially when you have it at every position for, in our team, especially on the back end. It's a tough position for young players, but we're seeing steps, we're seeing improvement, we're seeing what we need to see to believe that we're on the right path.
I know in the past you've used the additional future draft assets to kind of move into the back half of the first round to go out and get more of a player that's kind of in a tier, but to amass draft picks in 27, 28, are you hoping that one day maybe you can use those to kind of go out and get an impactful type player that can help surround some of these players that fits the long-term vision too?
Of course, yeah, and that's not something we're necessarily married to only happening down the road. Like, those are things that we have explored, we have attempted, and there's the reality of it is that really good players, especially really good young players, are so hard to shake loose. It is what it is, and it's natural, it's understandable, but it's something we're always trying to do, and so we've got the ammo to continue to explore those avenues and try and acquire talent, and so with the future in mind, with the growth and understanding where our gaps may be and where we may need to add in the future, both in the short and long term, based on when we have draft picks. We got them for the next number of drafts. We're well positioned for that, and so and so it's something that you have to plan for and be prepared to execute on if the opportunity arises. And what we can control is being prepared, and we are prepared from that standpoint. And so we've got the capital, we've got the assets. It's just waiting for the right window to open to act on that. But again, we can't act if we're not prepared, and so we are prepared.
You ended last season by adding obviously a lot of guys from college. Do you envision that possibility to see Sasha Boisvert coming over, or if Mondell's season ends early enough, could he play in the NHL this season?
Yeah, they could. Again, these are conversations that we're going to have once their seasons are done. We don't want to wish an early end to any of their seasons. We hope they have a ton of success wherever they are. We want, with our prospects, we're always telling them, like, just be where your feet are and have as much success as you can in those spots. But it's certainly conversations we'll have when they do finish up, and then we'll see what direction they want to go. We don't normally set those things up in advance unless it's very time sensitive. Example like a Ryan Green last year, we had 2 games left, I think, when his season ended, so he had to act very quickly. So it had to be a bit of prep work in advance, but we try and just leave the player to play, and then when the season's done, we have those conversations with them at that time. And so a little too early to say, but I think it'd be disingenuous to say we won't have those conversations with those players when the time comes.
You got the 2 deals with Edmonton done earlier than last
Yep.
minute. Were you intentionally trying to get in front of things and be a little bit early, or was it just the right timing for both sides?
Yeah, a little bit of the right timing. I'm also someone that in my preparation in the lead up for something like this, I like to know what I want. I like to know what my thresholds are and where my my line is on when I will do a deal, when I won't do a deal, when I'll wait and when I'll act. And so both certainly, we got what we wanted, and I guess, you always try to reevaluate, like, could we have held off longer and got a little bit more? Maybe not. Maybe that all goes away. I don't know. But, we go into every conversation understanding what we want, knowing what we want to get out of it, and if that is met, then we'll do it. And if it's earlier, great. If we have to wait on that and we get it later, then that works too. But I'm of the belief that, if there's something to act on, you act on it. And especially, the other thing too is there's a personal component here where with Murph and Dickie, I wanted to give them an opportunity, and the last thing I would want is to hold out for a little something more, like this little bit more, and it dry up and they don't get to experience something like that. Not that they asked to go out or anything, but in exploring the market, this was a great opportunity for both of them, and so it was something I didn't want to wait around and have dry up. It necessitated action, and so we took it. But I'm not big on waiting to wait. If that sets the market, that sets the market, for better or worse. But I'd rather get a deal done with a return that I'm satisfied with ahead of time than sweat it out and not either it goes sideways and you lose something or you just wait for the sake of waiting. I don't necessarily believe in that either. So
With that, with a guy like Billy Mccay and him also being an unrestricted free agent this summer, was it a matter of that package that you wanted to get back wasn't met, or was there some maybe reluctance to completely strip all the free agents out?
yeah, probably probably a little bit of both. I think Mickey is someone that I want to keep Mickey around. I want to keep him around. I really like what he brings to the team. We really appreciate him organizationally. I think he plays a big role for us. Not that anyone else didn't, but I think he's a player we really liked having around, and we like having as a Blackhawk. And so, if someone was going to approach us, they had to make it worth our while and compel us to act, and that certainly didn't happen. Frankly, I'm glad I didn't have to make a tough decision there, because I like having Mickey as a Blackhawk. He's a good guy, good family, and we value him a lot. And so we're happy to have him around through the end of the season, and then we'll see if there's anything there beyond that. But I think our intention is to get with his representation and try and see if there's something there. But that's where the business takes over, and we'll see where that goes. But that would be our intent is to play out the year, and then we'll see where the future goes. There's nothing new on that front. It's just someone that we would like to bring back because we do appreciate him. But that's the business side that we'll tackle in the future. So
after the Connor Murphy trade, I think there was a lot of assumption that it was going to create an opportunity for Kevin Korinsky. Yesterday he was sent down after 2 games. Where does he stand with the organization right now, and what can you say about maybe his future fit with the team?
yeah, no, well, look, Kevin's a 21-year-old defenseman that I think is, if you ask me if he's going to benefit more from popping into the lineup here or playing big minutes in Rockford, it would be playing big minutes in Rockford. And so that's where we see his development best served right now, and so that's why we did it. I think we also want to get a look at Ethan here. He's certainly got a lot less NHL experience than Kevin has, but I think we need to get Kevin minutes and keep getting him minutes, because we have seen some really nice strides, and we want to keep that positive momentum going into the off season. But we're big fans of Kevin. He's got a ton of upside, a ton of ability. He's still raw. He's still getting into the pro game and learning through that process and that development process. But he's someone that we really like. We have a lot of time for, and again, going to Rockford is not a punishment, and it's a opportunity to keep growing your game and be ready when the opportunity arises, and that's what we expect of him. That's what we expect of all the young players in Rockford, is that they're staying ready, they're committing themselves to their development, and making the most of their time with the Ice Hogs, because it's time well spent, and we've got eyes on them every single day, watch every single one of their games, so it's not like they go down there into a black hole they're never seen. Like we've got hands on and eyes on them all the time, watching and making sure that they're taking the right steps, and we believe he has this year, and want him to keep taking that positive step, but we also don't want just bodies hanging around here too. So if there's development left to be served, then you go to Rockford and keep working on the development. That's what he's going to do.
On that note, with Lev Schnapp, he's certainly had some ups and downs since we last talked to you. How would you evaluate his season overall, and more recently, how would you evaluate how he's responded to that removal from the lineup for a bit there before the break?
Yeah, I think when you do something like we did with Arty, where we took him out for a number of games, almost had like a pseudo training camp with him, and that can go one of two ways. They can embrace that, they can dig in, or they can pull back and maybe either feel bad for themselves or feel frustrated. And Arty dug in. He went full throttle into the development opportunity that was presented, did everything we asked of him. He went back to Florida, and I know he did a lot of grinding over the break in Florida, and came back, and I thought the game in Utah was one of his stronger games that we've seen. And so again, there's a level of volatility with young players, especially young players in the NHL, where sometimes you lose that confidence or you lose that mojo a little bit, and it's hard to get that back. And so it's our job to figure out what's best to get that back. Sometimes that's Rockford, sometimes that's just sitting out in the NHL and with a little breather. And with Arty, I think we determined that in his case it was best served here in the NHL with our coaches, with the development staff up here, and I believe he's responded very well. Now, there's the ebbs and flows you get with young defensemen, in particular with young players in general. It's not always a linear upward trajectory. Sometimes there's little dips, but you hope that in the aggregate it's there are gains there that are being made, and I feel there certainly have been, both from a defensive physicality standpoint, his puck movement, just comfort level on the ice. I think coming out of the break, he just looks a lot more settled. Some of that is experience, some of that is a little time out, frankly, from a long grinding season. I'm really excited about the way Arty's trended, and certainly when you look where he was a couple of years ago to where he was a year from now, or a year back from now to this point, I think it's constant improvement, constant upward trajectory, or maybe not constant upward trajectory, but in general, it's the arrow's definitely pointed up, and so we're really excited about that, and we think the sky's the limit for this kid. So.
With Bedard, has there been any recent contract talks, or do you expect that to be end of the season conversation at this point?
Yeah, we'll handle that after the end of the season.
The end of last season changed sort of the feeling of the whole year, where it was just so positive and younger players had played so well. Over these last 21 games, is there anything you'd like to see, or anything that I guess can give it a similar vibe for where you guys might not make the playoffs again? Yeah,
I think again, it's funny, right? It's nice that we ended that period, with some positivity, and that's certainly great. And I think that went into the off season at a really opportune time for everyone. But that's the ebb and flow. It'd be nice if we hit a high point towards the end, right? And I'm just excited to see some of these young players take on a little more opportunity, a little more ownership of the season, right? Now that Murph's moved on to Edmonton, on the right side we'll see Louis, Arty, and Sam all at the same time, right? Third line center, we'll get to test a couple guys out there now that Dickey's with the Oilers, and so there's some really good opportunities for guys to jump in, grab hold of, and then, as you asked earlier, there's perhaps the influx of more young players coming down the stretch here, and so there's a lot of exciting learning that we're going to do organizationally on some of these players. Some exciting opportunities for those players to jump into and grab hold of and show that they can perform in those certain roles and take hold of those for spots moving forward. And so, I think there's a lot to watch, a lot to pay attention to, and a lot to be excited about from a youth and opportunity standpoint. And so hopefully that translates into some nice results down the stretch and some good success for some young players to build on exiting the season and going into next season.
Connor's talked about the emotions of going through trade deadlines and being a team that is selling at this stage of the season. Do you worry about that wearing on him going through that, and knowing that it's more of a long-term process to get to a point where you're adding at deadlines rather than selling?
Yeah, honestly, I'd probably worry more if it wasn't bothering guys, to be honest, because I think that would reflect some sort of disengagement from the group. I don't think anyone's pleased about being sellers. I don't want them to be. I think that's something that they've got to feel, and they've got to take, not only into the game but into the off season, and do everything they can to individually, and then combine that into a collective effort to make sure that we're just not in these spots moving forward, right? And you don't know what the future is going to bring, but I think it's a healthy thing to be that invested in your teammates and in your group, and love the group that you're working with every day, to the point that, unfortunately, when the business side of the industry takes hold and guys do move on, that you do feel that, because we want that close-knit group, we want that investment from everyone in each other, and I think we've seen that over the last couple of days. And obviously these are great people that we're moving out, and it's understandable why people, the players and the staff and the organization and the fans would be disappointed to see them move on. But again, that's the nature of the industry we're in. That stuff's going to happen. So I don't want this to be something we do every single year moving forward. And I know the players certainly don't want that either. But I wouldn't say it's something that necessarily worries me, because I just think it's absolutely naturally. You go into locker rooms around the NHL where this has happened, and that's the reaction you're going to get, or that's the reaction I hope you would get. And so I think it's totally normal, totally natural, but also not something we want to live annually.